Thank you to you all. Guess I'm batting cleanup. I'm J.D. Kemp, founder of two different food ventures here in Boston. One is the Crop Circle Kitchen. It's a business incubator in Jamaica Plain, supports between 30 and 40 startup food entrepreneurs and their enterprises, and it's a churning set of people that, 2 or 3 come in, 2 or 3 leave on about a monthly basis. And the other adventure is called FoodEx. It's an infrastructure business in the food space, and basically started with the intention of solving and or providing an alternative food system. So we looked at basically what was out there and the development of a regional food system and said, what are the biggest barriers? What are the things that we can solve? And have tried to jump in to fix as many of those as we can and try not to bite off too much. I think that, to me, is where my story comes together, because I don't remember whether I was an engineer first or a cook first. They both happened long before I can remember. Probably should have learned not to take apart the dishwasher before making dinner, but the two things were always a part of my life and something that I grew up with and knew very early that I would pursue them both in one way or another. But it never occurred to me until about 5 years ago that they could actually be the same thing. And they had always been very compartmentalized. I had gone to engineering school. I'm a systems engineer by training and had worked for a series of tech ventures here in Boston and elsewhere, and mostly Defense Department work and other totally inglorious things. And it was all very fascinating for my brain, but then I'd shut it off and I'd go home, or I'd drive to a farm, or I'd go to a farm stand and go home and spend 2 or 3 hours at night cooking. Most nights. That probably sounds really weird, but it was always a way for me to unwind. It was just something I'd always engaged with, and it's always been a big part of my life. When I started looking at what I was cooking, we were cooking in our house, and where it came from and what was going on, started to realize that we were essentially sourcing for ourselves. We were driving to farms, we were going to farmers markets, we had this laundry list, 40, 50 sources of food in a given week, none of which were ideal. And I started to look around and realize that I was eating what I thought was great food, but no one else I knew was. Nobody had access to it. I had chefs who were friends who didn't have access to it, and started to realize that this was a bigger problem. And it wasn't just in my house and the way I was dealing with things, but that as the local food movement, as it were, started to get some traction 5 or 6 years ago, I started to look around and realize that everybody had the same problem. From the food service chefs right down to the home cooks, getting access to good food at reasonable prices in reasonable ways is a challenge. And the second thing I realized, see engineer, entrepreneur, was that the people who determined who was buying from whom and at what price and what was going on and where food was going had absolutely no motivation to help out the growers and the people producing the food, nor the buyers and the chefs and the eaters on the other side. There was no reason that the existing distribution infrastructure and the food system as a whole could essentially heal itself, in my opinion, and move toward a more sustainable vision of how to organize itself as a system. So we jumped in to see what we could do about that. Some of that is Crop Circle Kitchen is providing a platform for new food startups to have a space to join this movement and be a part of what's going on. And part of it, the other side of that, is the much uglier, as it were, nuts and bolts business of food distribution. And we dumped into that to try to provide a different way for buyers and sellers to see each other across a marketplace and get connected that way. And I'm glad to say we found some threads that have brought some great meaning both to farmers and to the buyers, and are starting to show a story that says this is actually possible. It's totally possible for a chef at an institutional scale to purchase tens of thousands of pounds of produce and protein on a weekly basis at prices that match the commodities they used to buy from overseas and across the country and everything else. And it takes some business changes, it takes some creative thinking, it takes a lot of business model evolution. It's really what it is, but it's possible. And the thing that I realized through all of this is my sort of worlds collided and convalesced back into the same place, is that all of these threads come together when you look at the development of food and bringing food into the urban environment and solving some of these problems. There are environmental solutions, there are food security solutions, there are food safety solutions. Certainly when you talk about economic development and regional economic forces, all of these things come together in food. That's why we're all talking about it today. It's why it's become such a great topic. And I certainly encourage anyone out there who is thinking of becoming a food entrepreneur that we have a lot of problems to solve. There's no question about that. It's a very critical part of our evolution, literally, as humans, I think, to re-engage with our food supply and get back engaged with what's going on there. And I look forward to talking to all of you, and thanks for having us.